I'm Clara Monroe, 28, and I've spent much of my life feeling like a whisper in my family's loud story. Our home in Port Blossom was a narrow, salt-sprayed house that clung to a cliffside, overlooking the restless gray churn of the sea. It was a house that seemed to amplify sound, and the sound it amplified most was the echo of my sister Isabella's accomplishments. 2 years my senior, Bella was the sun around which our family orbited. Her piano melodies, precise and brilliant, would drift from the parlor, a constant soundtrack to my childhood. Her debate trophies lined the mantelpiece, gleaming under the coastal sun. My parents, Catherine and Thomas, spoke of her with a breathless pride that was its own form of weather system in our home. I was the quiet one, the one with clay under her fingernails and sketches of gnarled driftwood in a worn notebook. My world was tactile and silent. It was the cool, damp spin of the potter's wheel in the garden shed, the earthy scent of wet clay, the patient transformation of a shapeless lump into a vessel with a story. My parents were not unkind. They simply operated on a different frequency. A "well done, Clara," for a piece accepted into a local art fair was a polite murmur, easily swept away by the gale force of, "Did you hear? Isabella just landed the internship in the city." I adored my sister, truly. I basked in her warmth, even as I learned to live comfortably in the cool shade of her shadow. She had a magnetism that I, with my quiet hands and quieter voice, could only observe. After finishing my arts degree, I moved to Crest Haven, a city humming with creative energy, a place where the air smelled of rain on pavement and roasting coffee instead of salt and brine. I found a small studio apartment with a leaky skylight and a view of a brick wall covered in ivy. Here, I was not Isabella's little sister. I was Clara Monroe, the ceramicist whose mugs felt just right in your hands, whose bowls held the light in their glaze. I built a life, piece by piece, vessel by vessel. I had friends who saw me, clients who valued my art, and a quiet confidence that bloomed in the space I had created for myself. But trips home to Port Blossom always felt like stepping back in time. I would revert to my role as the pensive, artistic dreamer, the one who hadn't quite figured out the real world, yet. Still, I held on to a fragile hope, a belief that one day, the people who had known me longest would finally see me for who I had become. It was this hope that carried me across an ocean to the grand city of Florian for Isabella's wedding, a stage set for what I believed could be a new beginning for us. But it was there, under the glittering chandeliers of a city far from home, that I would learn the profound and painful lesson that some invitations are not an offer of inclusion, but a confirmation of your place on the outside. The first tremor of what was to come arrived last autumn, on a trip to Florian for Isabella's official engagement announcement. She had moved there years ago, climbing the corporate ladder of a luxury lifestyle brand with astonishing speed. Now, she was engaged to Adrian, an effortlessly charming tech innovator whose ventures were frequent subjects of glossy magazine features. The city itself felt like an extension of them, historic, beautiful, and unapologetically grand. The dinner was held in a restaurant called the Silver Swan, a hushed, elegant space with dark wood paneling and windows that framed the city's shimmering argent river. I'd spent more than I should have on a deep emerald silk dress, and arrived with a bottle of vintage champagne, my heart light with a genuine, uncomplicated happiness for her. "Clara, you made it," Bella said, enveloping me in a brief, fragrant hug. The diamond on her finger was a shard of captured starlight. Before I could offer my congratulations, her gaze had already flickered over my shoulder to a new arrival. "Penelope, darling, you look divine." I found my place at the long, linen-draped table, a satellite in a solar system I could never quite penetrate. My parents were in their element, holding court. My father, Thomas, was deep in conversation with Adrian about market disruptions, while my mother, Catherine, recounted Isabella's recent promotion with the breathless reverence of a historian detailing a royal coronation. I tried to find my entry point. "The city is just beautiful, Bella. Have you thought about where you'll have the wedding?" She waved a dismissive, elegant hand. "Oh, it's all under control. Adrian and I have a vision. The conversation immediately pivoted, a flock of birds changing direction in perfect unison. They spoke of venues I'd never heard of, florists flown in from abroad, and a guest list that sounded more like a merger of two corporations than a joining of two families. I listened, I nodded, I sipped my wine. A familiar, hollow feeling began to expand in my chest. It was the same quiet ache I'd felt on countless evenings in Port Blossom, listening to the family's symphony in which I was a silent instrument. I tried once more, turning to my mother. I just got a commission, Mum. A whole set of dinnerware for that new restaurant, the Gilded Fern. Oh, that's nice, dear, she said, her eyes already scanning the room. Bella, did you see the calligrapher I sent you? Her work on the Astor invitations was sublime. My father, when I caught his eye, simply gave me a distracted nod, his attention tethered to the glowing screen of his phone. I watched the lights of Florian dance on the surface of the Argent River outside, a city of a million glittering stories, and felt utterly, completely invisible in mine. Leaving the restaurant that night, the crisp autumn air felt like a slap, waking me from a dream I kept foolishly trying to enter. Back in Port Blossom, the wedding became a tidal wave, sweeping away all other topics of conversation. My phone would buzz with texts from Mum, not asking questions, but delivering decrees. Photos of Isabella's couture gown. Links to the wedding website, a polished monument to her and Adrian's love story. I was an audience member, never a participant. Hoping to carve out a small role for myself, to weave a piece of my love for her into the event, I called her. Bella, I had an idea. What if I made custom ceramic bud vases for each place setting as wedding favors? It would be my gift to you. There was a brief pause on the line. Oh, Clara, that's sweet, she said, the word sweet landing like a consolation prize. But Penelope has already sourced these perfect little silver boxes from a designer in Milan. It's all part of the aesthetic, you understand. We need everything to be cohesive. Penelope was her maid of honor, a lifestyle influencer whose entire brand was built on aspirational perfection. I swallowed the familiar lump of disappointment. Of course, I murmured. I understand. It's her day, I told myself, a mantra I was beginning to wear thin. The exclusions, small and sharp as paper cuts, began to accumulate. A phone call with my mother revealed I was not to be a bridesmaid. Well, darling, Bella has so many dear friends from her life in Florian, Mum explained, her voice softening with a placating tone I knew all too well. And Adrian has his sisters. She just couldn't fit everyone in. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was to have a sister who didn't make a space for you beside her. She had a retinue of 12 bridesmaids, including a distant cousin she hadn't seen in 5 years. The final visit to Port Blossom before the wedding was for my father's birthday. The family was gathered in the living room, the sea wind rattling the old window panes. But Isabella was a world away, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone as she texted furiously with her wedding planner. My father, attempting to make conversation, turned to me. So, are you still making those pots and things, Clara? It's called being a ceramicist, Dad, I said, my voice quieter than I'd intended. And yes, I am. Each slight was a quiet wound, unremarkable on its own, but together they formed a constellation of hurt. As I booked my flight to Florian, packing my emerald silk dress and a carefully wrapped gift, I clung to one last, fraying thread of hope, that my presence there, my willingness to show up, would be enough. That in the midst of the grandest day of her life, my sister might finally turn and see me. But as I zipped my suitcase, a cold whisper of doubt curled in my stomach, warning me that I was flying towards an empty seat. The rehearsal dinner was held in a private gallery in Florian's old town, a breathtaking space with soaring ceilings, ancient stone walls, and modern art that pulsed with color. Lanterns cast a warm, golden light over everything, making the scene feel like a living painting. I'd flown for 10 hours, my body aching with jet lag, but my spirit was determinately optimistic. I clutched my gift, a pair of exquisite, hand-blown champagne flutes I'd found in a little artisan shop in Crest Haven, and walked in, scanning the crowd for a familiar, welcoming face. Isabella was the undisputed center of the room, a vision in cream silk, holding court with a laughing circle of her bridesmaids and Adrian's family. I caught her eye and offered a hopeful smile. She gave me a quick, distracted nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, not invitation, before turning back to her conversation. My assigned seat was at a table at the far edge of the room, populated by Adrian's great-aunts and a business associate who asked me 3 times what I did for a living before forgetting my answer. My parents were at a table of honor near the happy couple, my father raising a glass to toast Adrian's latest success. Penelope, the maid of honor, swept past my table without a glance. I made an effort. I turned to the great-aunt beside me and asked about her journey to Florian. I tried to catch my mother's eye across the room. I felt a desperate need to anchor myself, to prove I was a part of this, not just a spectator who had wandered in by mistake. But my words felt like pebbles tossed into a rushing river, swallowed by the noise and laughter and clinking glasses that all revolved around Isabella. Leaving the gallery later, the cobbled streets of Florian were slick with a fine mist, the city's lights haloed and soft. A profound loneliness settled over me, heavier than my fatigue. The wedding will be different, I told myself, a desperate prayer sent up into the misty night. At the wedding, I will find my place. But deep down, where the truth resides, a quiet fear had taken root, whispering that there had never been a place for me at all. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. The venue was the Crystal Garden, a magnificent glass conservatory perched atop one of Florian's most iconic buildings, offering a panoramic view of the sprawling, historic city. It was a fantasy brought to life. Thousands of white orchids cascaded from the ceiling, a string quartet played softly in a corner, and the air hummed with expensive perfume and joyful anticipation. I wore a gown the color of a deep sapphire sea, and for a fleeting moment, as I caught my reflection in a pane of glass with the city laid out behind me, I felt a sense of belonging. In my hands, I carried my gift for Isabella. After my offer of handmade favors was rejected, I had decided to make her something extraordinary, a piece of my soul she couldn't dismiss. I had spent weeks at my wheel, throwing a set of 12 large, luminous porcelain serving bowls. Each one was unique, glazed in a shade of ethereal white with a delicate, hand-painted rim of pure gold leaf. They were heavy, substantial, a testament to my craft and my love. I'd had them professionally packed in a large, elegant box. This was not a small gesture. It was a statement, a peace offering, a plea. It had cost me nearly a month's income in materials and lost work time, a value I estimated at over $1,200, but the cost was irrelevant. It was a piece of me. The ceremony was flawless. Isabella was breathtaking, an otherworldly vision in white. Adrian watched her with an expression of pure adoration. I sat in a row far from the front, my heart swelling with a complicated mix of love, pride, and a wistful sadness. I clapped until my palms stung, allowing the beauty of the moment to wash over me, hoping the reception would be my chance to finally connect, to give her my gift and feel the warmth of her gratitude. After the ceremony, guests drifted towards the reception area, champagne flutes in hand. I made my way to the ornate, gold-framed seating chart that stood on an easel near the entrance. I scanned the list of elegantly calligraphed names. Table 1, the head table, Isabella and Adrian, Catherine and Thomas Monroe. Table 2, Adrian's parents and siblings. Table 3, Penelope and the other bridesmaids. I scanned further down. Table 10. Table 15. My heart began to beat a little faster. My name wasn't there. Then I saw it. At the very bottom of the parchment, scribbled in a different, hurried pen, were the words, Clara Monroe, Table 18. A polite usher noticed my confusion. Miss Monroe? Right this way. He led me past the round, beautifully decorated tables, each with a towering floral centerpiece and glowing candles. We passed table 16, filled with Adrian's laughing colleagues. We passed table 17, where friends from Cresthaven I barely knew were seated. And then we stopped. We were in a corner of the grand room, tucked behind a large marble pillar that partially obscured the view of the head table. To my left was a swinging service door, through which waiters bustled with trays of food and clattering stacks of dirty dishes. The air here smelled faintly of dishwater and stress. And there, next to the service door, stood a single, bare, metal folding chair. Taped to its back was a small, unceremonious piece of paper with my name on it. I stood there, frozen. The sounds of the reception, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, seemed to fade into a dull roar. My blood ran cold, then hot, a furious blush creeping up my neck and flooding my cheeks. This was not an oversight. This was a message, delivered with brutal, silent clarity. You are an afterthought. You are an inconvenience. You do not belong here. Penelope, the maid of honor, swept by in a cloud of silk and perfume, her eyes flicking from me to the chair. "Oh," she said with a tiny, dismissive shrug. "You're fine here, right?" She didn't wait for an answer, already gliding away towards the main festivities. Through a gap in the pillar, I could see Isabella at the head table, laughing at something Adrian had whispered to her, blissfully unaware, or perhaps willfully ignorant, of the profound humiliation she had just inflicted upon her own sister. The hurt was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. But it wasn't just about this chair, this single, damning moment. It was the culmination of a lifetime of moments. The unheard art prize, the dismissed offer of help, the casual exclusions, the title of Bella's little sister that I could never seem to shed. They all coalesced into this one, stark image, a lone metal chair by the service door. A strange calm descended upon me. The chaotic storm of emotion in my chest settled into a hard, clear certainty. I looked at the heavy, beautiful box in my hands. I walked across the marble floor, my sapphire dress whispering around my ankles, right up to the head table. I gently placed the large box on the linen tablecloth, next to the towering, multi-tiered wedding cake. Then, without a word to anyone, I turned and walked out of the crystal garden. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, a wild mix of betrayal, grief, and a terrifying, exhilarating spark of self-preservation. I was crossing the wide terrace, the glittering lights of Florian a sharp, cold tapestry below me, when her voice cut through the night. "Clara!" Isabella's shout was sharp, imperious. I heard the frantic click-clack of her heels on the stone. I stopped not because I wanted to obey, but because after a lifetime of silence, I needed to have this one, final conversation. I needed her to see what she had done. She reached me, breathless, her perfect chignon slightly askew, her veil a ghostly trail behind her. Her face was a mask of confused panic, the carefully constructed image of the serene bride beginning to crack. "Where are you going? What is wrong with you? It's my wedding." Her voice was high and trembling, but it felt like a performance. She was already casting herself as the wronged party. I turned to face her fully, the wind whipping a strand of hair across my face. A lifetime of swallowed words rose in my throat, but my voice, when it came, was unervingly steady. "You showed me where I belong, Bella," I said, my gaze level with hers. "At a folding chair, next to the kitchen. You couldn't even grant me the dignity of a real seat at your wedding." Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock before the defensiveness slammed back into place. "It was a mistake," she insisted, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The planner, she must have miscounted. There were so many last-minute RSVPs. I thought you wouldn't mind." A laugh escaped me, a raw, bitter sound that held no humor. "Wouldn't mind? You thought I wouldn't mind being treated like an unwanted piece of luggage? You made room for your boss, for Adrian's third cousins, for people you met 6 months ago. But your sister? Your sister gets hidden behind a pillar." She clutched her bouquet of white orchids as if it were a shield, her eyes darting back towards the glass doors of the reception hall, where the silhouettes of curious guests were gathering. "Clara, please," she hissed. "Don't make a scene." That word, scene, was a spark to dry tinder. "I'm not the one who made a scene, Isabella," I said, the fire finally reaching my voice. "You did. You made a scene when you looked at a seating chart and decided that I was the one person whose feelings didn't matter. That I was the one who could be shoved into a corner." Her excuses started to pour out, the stress, the pressure, the sheer scale of it all, but they were just noise, empty words that couldn't patch the gaping hole she had torn open. I held up a hand, silencing her. "I have spent my entire life making myself smaller so your light could seem brighter," I said, the truth of it landing with the weight of an anvil in the space between us. "I flew across an ocean. I brought you a gift made with my own 2 hands. I showed up, hoping for a crumb of recognition. And you hid me. You hid your own sister away like she was something to be ashamed of." I took a step back. "I'm done, Bella. I'm done with the shadow. I'm done with the corner." I turned and walked away, not looking back. Her voice called my name again, a thin, plaintive sound that was quickly swallowed by the vast, indifferent pulse of the city. My heart was shattered, but for the first time in my life, I felt the astonishing, liberating weight of being completely, entirely free. Back in Crest Haven, my small, quiet studio felt like a sanctuary. The world I had built for myself, with its scent of clay, turpentine, and brewing tea wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. But the outside world was loud. My phone buzzed and chimed with a relentless, accusatory rhythm. My mother's texts were short, sharp daggers. "Clara, you have utterly ruined Isabella's special day. I am so disappointed. You need to call your sister and apologize immediately." My father's voicemail was heavy with paternal sternness. "This is not how we raised you, Clara. To be so selfish. Your sister is devastated." Their words were echoes from my childhood, the familiar chorus telling me to be quiet, to be good, to prioritize Isabella's feelings above my own. They didn't ask what had happened. They didn't consider, even for a moment, that my actions might have been a reaction. They only saw their perfect family portrait, marred by my sudden, disruptive exit. I skipped the post-wedding brunch in Florian, changing my flight and flying home a day early. In my studio, I didn't answer the calls. I didn't reply to the texts. Instead, I worked. I wedged a large block of dark, earthy clay, the physical exertion a balm for my fractured heart. I threw myself into my art, letting the deep blues and fiery, volcanic oranges of my glazes speak the words I couldn't. I painted my pain and my defiance onto the curved surfaces of pots and vases. Then, a different kind of message appeared on my screen. It was from my cousin, Chloe, who had also flown in for the wedding. "Clara, I'm so sorry I didn't see it until it was too late. I saw that chair. It was disgusting. What they did to you was wrong. I'm here if you need to talk." Tears pricked my eyes. It was a single text, but it felt like a lifeline thrown into a churning sea. It was the first and only acknowledgement from anyone in my family that my hurt was valid. I didn't reply, not yet, but I held on to her words. They were an anchor. My phone's call log was a testament to the storm I had unleashed. 18 missed calls from Isabella, 10 from my mother, 5 from my father. With a sense of profound relief, I switched it off. The sudden silence was beautiful. In that quiet, I began to grieve, not for the wedding I had left, but for the family I was realizing I never truly had. The act of choosing myself was wrenching, a painful amputation of a part of me that had always strived for their approval. But as the days passed, the pain began to feel less like a wound and more like the clean, sharp ache of a bone being set correctly after a lifetime of being broken. I was done being the sister who gratefully accepted scraps from the table. I was done waiting for a seat that would never be offered. Several weeks later, the next volley was fired, this time on a public stage. Isabella posted a letter to her Instagram account, a masterpiece of curated vulnerability. It was a soft focus photo of the two of us as children in Port Blossom, our arms around each other on the windy beach. The caption, addressed to my sister, was a long, carefully worded monologue about the pressures of her wedding, her regret over our misunderstanding, and her deep, abiding love for me. It was expertly crafted to elicit sympathy. Then came the final, gut-wrenching line. My heart breaks that she chose to walk away from my most important day over something so trivial. Trivial. The word landed like a punch. A folding chair by the service entrance. A lifetime of being minimized. Trivial. The comments poured in immediately. Oh, Bella, my heart goes out to you. Family is everything. I hope she forgives you. Weddings are so stressful, she should understand. My pain was being publicly repackaged as a petty grievance, and I was being cast as the cruel, unforgiving sister who had ruined a perfect day over nothing. My chest tightened. I felt sick. But then, a new comment appeared, a small island of truth in a sea of saccharine sympathy. It was from my cousin Chloe. Wasn't Clara put in a folding chair by the service entrance next to the kitchen? That's not trivial, Bella. That's humiliating. Her comment was a small stone, but it created ripples. A few friends who had been at the wedding messaged me privately. I'm so sorry, Clara. I didn't realize that's where you were. That's awful. Isabella's post, intended to be a public absolution, had inadvertently revealed the damning detail she had tried to gloss over. The narrative began to stutter. In my quiet Cresthaven studio, I stared at my phone, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and resolve. I had no desire for a public war, but I would not allow her to rewrite my truth. She had drawn a line in the sand, and for the first time, I was ready to cross it, not with anger, but with the quiet, unshakable power of my own story. I waited a day, letting the storm of my emotions settle. I worked at my wheel, centering the clay as I tried to center myself. I created a piece unlike any I had made before, a miniature, stark white ceramic chair, flawlessly crafted but isolated on a turbulent, storm-gray platter. Then I sat down at my laptop and began to write. I started a blog post on my professional portfolio site, a space that was entirely my own. I titled it, The Seat I Refuse to Take. I began by talking about the light and shadows of our childhood in Port Blossom. I wrote about the quiet joy of my craft. I described the dinner at the Silver Swan in Florian, where my accomplishments were met with polite silence. I recounted the slights, the dismissals, the slow, painful realization that I was seen not as a whole person, but as a supporting character. And then I wrote about the wedding. I uploaded a photo. A friend who had been seated at table 17, horrified by what she'd seen, had discreetly snapped a picture on her phone and sent it to me days later. There it was in stark, undeniable detail. The cheap metal folding chair, the taped-on name, the pillar, the service door slightly ajar with a stack of dirty plates visible inside. I wrote about the $1,200 set of porcelain bowls I had poured my heart into, a gift that sat on the head table, unacknowledged. I explained that Isabella's mistake was not an isolated incident, but the final, unbearable expression of a lifelong pattern. I was not vengeful. I was factual, my tone deliberately calm and reflective. I concluded I did not leave to ruin my sister's day. I left to save a piece of myself. Family should be the place you feel most seen, not the place you are asked to disappear. Forgiveness requires acknowledgement, and love should not demand invisibility. This was not a seat I was willing to take. I took a deep breath, and I hit publish. I shared the link on my personal social media with a simple caption, "My story." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Friends and colleagues shared it. Other artists shared it. It resonated with a startling number of people. The comments were not about taking sides, but about shared experience. This made me cry. I'm the quiet one in my family too. Thank you for your courage, Clara. You have a right to your own light. Chloe texted me a single sentence. You did it. You told the truth. The post found its way into Isabella's world. The ripples became a wave. The consequences unfolded with a quiet, undeniable force. Penelope, the maid of honor, in a breathtaking act of self-serving opportunism, wrote a viral blog post of her own titled, Seeking Perfection, 5 Wedding Mistakes I've Witnessed and How to Avoid Them. Without using our names, she described the story of a bride's sister being seated by the kitchen, her own thoughtless, "You're fine here, right?" comment repurposed as a teachable moment about guest consideration. The story, now detached from our family, was picked up by lifestyle websites and shared on wedding forums, a cautionary tale for brides-to-be. Isabella's Instagram fell silent. Chloe told me she had canceled several social engagements and was keeping a low profile in Florian. The public narrative she had tried so hard to control had been replaced by a more truthful and far less flattering one. About a month after my post, a large, familiar box arrived at my studio in Cresthaven. It was the set of porcelain bowls, unopened, the elegant wrapping still intact. There was no note. It was a silent, sullen return to sender. A week after that, a text message appeared on my phone. It was from Isabella. I didn't know. I never understood how unseen you felt. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Can we talk? I stared at the words for a long time. It was the apology I had once craved, the acknowledgement I had ached for. But it had come only after her polished image had been fractured, after the truth was brought into the light not by her conscience, but by my refusal to stay silent. A faint, tentative hope stirred within me, but it was tangled with a new, hard-won wisdom. I didn't reply. Not yet. The power to decide if, and when, that conversation would happen was finally mine. Instead, I poured my energy into my work. My story had brought unexpected attention to my art, and a prominent gallery in Cresthaven offered me my first solo exhibition. The opening night was a crisp, clear evening. The gallery was filled with light, warmth, and the quiet hum of conversation. People milled about, studying my work, their faces reflecting the deep, rich colors of my glazes. My friends were there, my cousin Chloe had flown in, and my parents were not. They had sent a small, stilted card with a generic bouquet of flowers, an awkward gesture that felt more like a surrender than an apology. The centerpiece of the exhibit, standing alone in the middle of the room, was my new installation. I had titled it, A Seat at the Table. It featured a single, beautifully crafted wooden chair, its form elegant and strong. And on the seat, bathed in a soft spotlight, sat the stark white ceramic chair on its storm gray platter. It was a statement of pain, but also of transformation. It was the story of the seat I had refused and the one I had built for myself. Standing there, surrounded by people who saw me, who celebrated my voice and my vision, I felt a sense of peace that was deeper and more profound than any family approval I had ever chased. I had found my place, not by squeezing into a space someone else begrudgingly offered, but by carving out my own. The journey through the shadows had been excruciating, but it had led me here, into the light. To all of you who have followed this story, who have seen your own reflections in its quiet corners, thank you. You have borne witness to my heartbreak and to the slow, steady work of reclaiming a self that was almost lost. If this story has stirred something in you, I hope you will share it. I hope you will stay with me on this journey, and more importantly, I hope you will find the courage to carve out your own space at life's table, to demand your own seat, and to never, ever let anyone convince you that you belong in a corner. The future is an unglazed vessel, and we are all just beginning.